Hello everyone, my name is Simona and I'm doing a PhD in genetics. I've always had an interest in the living world around us and particularly in animals, which is why I did an undergraduate in zoology and eventually specialized in genetics. Throughout my studies, I found that, at least for me personally, DNA is the most fascinating molecule in the world. It is the blueprint of all life. It is the code that contains the secrets of every single tree and bush, every animal, every human, all of your friends, and yourself as well. While we have learned a lot about this code in the last 70 years or so, there's still so much we don't know. The complexity of it is immense. What we do know so far is that DNA is subdivided into genes and that these genes encode particular proteins, the so-called building blocks of life. And the proteins are essentially the machinery that drives everything in our cells. So things like cellular division, metabolism, height and skin color, eye color, intelligence, all of these things are governed by proteins. Very rarely is one of our features just directed or controlled by one gene. Most traits are complex, which means that there are multiple, sometimes hundreds of genes that control that feature. And their interactions on a molecular level can determine how that feature varies between people. All of us have a slightly different DNA code to each other, and that's why all of us look a bit different and are more prone to different diseases, for example. So, for your project, what I would suggest is that you pick a particular feature. It could be a physical feature, it could be a disease, perhaps, or you don't have to limit yourself to humans, although the most information you'll be able to find will be about humans. But basically, I want you to pick that one feature of interest to you and try to find out how it is controlled on genetic level. To do your research, you can use one of several databases that store wealth of information on genetics. First, you would have to pick your phenotype of interest. Phenotype is the scientific term we use to describe any physical or behavioral characteristic. Ideally, you should try to be as specific as possible in your search. For example, if you're interested in a particular disease, then you would try and narrow it down as much as possible. If you type something like cancer in the search engine, then that wouldn't be very helpful because thousands of genes would come up. However, if you specify a bit and type something like breast cancer, then you would get a bit more meaningful results. You can begin your project in the Monarch Initiative website, which is a large database that contains multiple different phenotypes and genotypes. So if you type the particular feature or disease that you're interested in here, you will get a list of all the genes that are associated with this feature. So all the genes that contribute to this feature or to this disease. For example, if you're interested in the widow's peak, which is basically when your hairline sort of peaks forward on your forehead like this, you can just type widow's peak here. Select the top option, ideally, that says phenotype, and first of all you get a description of what the widow's peak is. This is the scientific description. And if you click on gene, you'll get a list of all the genes that are associated with this particular feature. So all of these are known to contribute to the feature of the widow's peak. Now, if you click on one of them, you get a description of that gene. So you learn what this gene encodes, what is the protein product that comes out of the code of the DNA. It's quite terminology heavy. You have encountered some of these terms before and others will be new to you. but that's part of the learning process. So you can read that this gene in particular plays a role in actin cytoskeleton reorganization during facial morphogenesis. Basically, when your face is developing in the womb, this gene plays a role in certain cellular reorganizations. If you scroll down, you can see a lot of different information. For example, you can see schematics of what this gene looks like. If you're interested in seeing this gene in a bit more detail, you can look it up in the UCSC genome browser, where you type up its name, and it gives you a very detailed schematic of every single human gene, as well as a lot of animal genes. You can zoom in. So this on top is the gene, and it tells you which parts are exons. So you can see this is exon 8 out of 16, and which parts are introns. And if you remember this from biology class, exons are the actual protein coding parts, while introns are removed before protein synthesis. The genome browser also gives you information about which regions of this particular gene are similar between us and other species. So you can see that the other species here that are given are dogs, mice, elephants, but also zebrafish and lampreys. And the areas that are black in all of them are areas that are conserved between all these species. So they're the same in all these species. And usually these conserved regions in the genes tend to be conserved because they play a very fundamental part in the gene. And if you look where this falls in the actual gene, it happens to be in an exon, so the important part, the protein coding part. Let's go back to the Monarch Initiative website. From here on, there's endless information you can dig into. You can look at, for example, function, and it tells you all the different functions that this gene is thought to have. It is part of actin cytoskeleton, which you may have encountered in your biology curriculums. It is involved in the cell cycle. It is involved in cell adhesion. Okay, then you can look into anatomy. It tells you where this gene is expressed. All of our cells contain the exact same DNA code. They have the exact same genes in them, but the difference between your muscle cells and your skin cells is that different genes are turned on and turned off. And that's what gene expression means. It tells you where genes are turned on and turned off. So it gives you a list here. You can see that this gene is active in skeletal muscle, in the tongue, in the central nervous system. So it's expressed in lots of different tissues, which suggests that it's quite a fundamental gene. If you click on phenotype, you'll see that this gene is associated with a lot of different phenotypes as well. Cleft upper lip, widow's peak, strabismus, frontal bossing. What this means is that, for example, if you have a variation within that gene, so for example, mutations within the gene, you could get all these different features. We go back to our list of 11 genes that are associated with widow's peak. Once you have looked into your genes individually, you can try to study them as a group. So we know that as a group they contribute to the widow's peak, but are they responsible for any other features in a combination? And in order to do that, we can take their names and put them in a different database. So we can copy them as a table, paste them in Excel, which I've already done here, and then just select the column that contains the gene names. And we copy that into another database that is called the gprofiler. You gotta make sure that humans are selected under organism, and then you just paste the list of genes. Here you get a graphical representation of what your genes do as a combination. If you click on detailed results, you will get a breakdown into what they do in terms of their biological process involvement. And here you also see some of the phenotypes that they're involved in as well. So obviously the top one is the widow's peak, but you can see that there are quite a few other ones, like wide nasal bridge, oral cleft, cleft lip. And here you can see which of the genes are involved in this particular feature. So it's interesting that most of these genes seem to be involved in facial features. This is also quite useful if the trait that you originally looked into has too many genes associated with it. Say that it has 50 genes, then looking into each of them individually is very laborious. So you can look up a few of them and then paste the list of all of them into gprofiler, and you can see what they have in common with each other outside of the widow's peak. The databases that I've just introduced you to are rich in all kinds of information, and of course it's not possible for you to include all of it, so you just have to be selective. Just add whatever is relevant to your interests and to the type of project that you decide to do. For example, if you want to do a visual project where you draw out a lot of the genes, you draw the processes of genes becoming proteins, becoming processes, becoming physical features, then you might want to use the genome browser, for example, because it shows you very clearly how genes look. Some of the information that you'll be interested in might not be available in the Monarch Initiative website. So, for example, some of the genes might not have a thorough description of their cellular function. And if that's the case, you can always look them up in Google by the name and find more information about them. You could approach this project in two different ways. You could either do very thorough research and then write a detailed scientific report, or you can do a science communication project. And for that, you need to do a bit less research and spend a bit more of your time thinking about how to present what you've discovered. And there are quite a few different approaches you can take to that. On the CREST website, I saw that someone in the past has done a play, for example, and you can really think out of the box with this. You can maybe do a comic strip or whatever interests you, whatever you're passionate in. Just think about how to present the information in an interesting, engaging, and comprehensible way. And most importantly, make sure to pick a feature that you're interested in. Pick something that you're passionate about and something that will make your experience of making this project enjoyable.